الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. And this is the first episode of our new season or new series. I felt I wanted to um, take part in or start off, and the show is called Qawl Sadid. Now, Qawl Sadid, as in a strong, true statement, and I wanted to make these videos where I would interview various members of the community, primarily for the purpose of discussing our problems in the community, our concerns in the community, and getting these things open and visible to the public eye, not hidden. Unfortunately, we have a bad habit in our community of hiding things or suppressing things, whereby we don't feel it's necessary or needed to discuss things openly. I've heard many times brothers say, "Oh, let's keep it quiet, let's not deal with things." And yeah, I do respect the idea of keeping things or private problems quiet. Some problems are gone far beyond being private and are very much in the public sphere, so we need to discuss them openly. So that's primarily what we got going on here, and that's the purpose of the show. And for those who've had their heads in the sand for the past couple of weeks, there was a video that was uploaded a week ago or two, where a brother made a statement where he was addressing some youth, and he was saying, "Brothers, stop acting black," or something like of those lines. And this caused, you could say, a lot of concern from the community, uproar, upset, and this, you could say, brought up the topic which is always been there. It's never disappeared. It's always been there, the issue of racism in the community. So rather, I felt it was important that whilst the iron is hot, whilst this topic is still available in the public eye, and been spoken about, we really need to get this thing addressed. And I don't want to be a victim of another brush it underneath the carpet again. Let's not talk about it. Inshallah, we're one ummah. I hope that it will be an issue where we can get these topics discussed, and most importantly, because it's not just important to discuss the issue, but also to formulate solutions, actionable solutions for everyone to keep in mind, for institutions to legislate. I think that's very important as well, for masajid, Islamic institutions, to put in place procedures to deal with racism that exists, and for us on an individual basis to try and address this topic in our everyday dealings. So without further delay, I want to introduce our brother here, brother Nabil, Abdur-Rashid, and our brother Nabil is of Nigerian descent, and I mentioned that purely because it was mentioned in another video in a very unsavory manner. I don't know why it was mentioned, but it was mentioned. Not that it's relevant to the discussion. It could be from Australia, it could be Aborigine, who cares? The point here is the discussion at hand. Was you born and raised in the UK?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I was born in the UK, but moved back to Nigeria at a very young age and grew up there for a while.
Okay. I've known Nabil for many years. He's been very vocal on the topic of race, and I've even expressed to Nabil in the past how I wanted to deal with topics of black history specifically. And I've been interested in the issue of history more so from when I became Muslim and I studied Islamic University in Medina. Some feedback there. I think it's very important for everyone to know history, not just black history, not just Arab history, but history as a whole. It puts things into perspective, and I think it does take away the veil over many people's eyes about a lot of things. Also, one very important point I want to mention here, I think it's and I wanted to start off with that, is I've known Nabil for many years as a person of Tawheed and Sunnah. I mentioned this specifically, not to dig at anyone, but just to clarify that this is not an issue of Sufi versus Salafi. It's not an issue of Shia versus Sunni. This is an issue of race in the community. In all communities, I guess it is an issue, but we're talking about the Muslim community. So hopefully, if anyone has any preconceptions about Nabil's background, then that's how I've known him for many, many years. And very quickly, if Nabil wants to give us any information about himself, his hobbies, what he does, before we get into the nitty gritty.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Hi, my name is Nabil Abdur-Rashid, as been mentioned before. And yes, South London based. I pray regularly at Croydon ICT, which I guess by definition is a Salafi mosque. Although I don't actually apply the term Salafi to myself, you'll find that most of my beliefs, probably the bulk of my beliefs, are in line with that methodology. Obviously, I'm not perfect, nor do I claim to be the bastion of Islamic practice. But yes, indeed, I am a Sunni Muslim, not a revert. No, nothing wrong with being a revert, but I'm not. I grew up in northern Nigeria. So my whole family are Muslim, alhamdulillah, Malikis. So yeah, that's the whole, because there is a lot of misconception about me being a Nation of Islam member, and it's very interesting. There's one picture of me as a kid wearing a suit, right, with a bow tie, and I think that's what it is. That and the fact that I speak well and I talk about black issues, because obviously that's not allowed. As a proper practicing Muslim, I have to wear harachis and a white thobe. No offense to all my brothers from Brixton. I do stand-up comedy, as a lot of people know. I also do a lot of other things. Like I do public speaking. I talk about things like diversity, white supremacy, and anti-racism talks, and talks on history and so on, and other social issues at universities and other institutions of education. I currently am a consultant for several supported housing organizations. I started my own supported housing organization in Croydon. We've housed and helped, I think at the moment now, over 200 vulnerable homeless people find either private accommodation, or we've housed them in supported accommodation with the intention to further put them into education or employment. So from a young age, social activism and empowerment of the oppressed, so to speak, has been a very core part of my being. I believe very adamantly that every Muslim should be involved in some form of social enterprise or charity. So I don't back down from that statement. I think every Muslim should be doing something active. I'm also very vocal about issues of women's rights. I'm not a feminist by any means. Feminists hate me, but I think that these issues are issues that need to be discussed. What else? University. I went to that, and I have a bunch of degrees to say I'm smart. I still can't open up a jar of jam, but apparently I'm supposed to be smart because I've got certificates and stuff. But I just think I'm very, very anti-blackness. I think it's an issue that I see particularly that enrages me, because my earliest memory of racism is from the age of 9. My father and my uncle, who was a professor in Dubai, we were on holiday in Egypt, because as a family we traveled a lot. And while we were in Egypt, I remember an Arab soldier, well, Egyptian, because technically they're not Arabs, but that's another discussion. I remember an Arab soldier, or Egyptian soldier, walking up to my dad after we'd already cleared security and snatching his passport out of his breast pocket. And my father, being my father, snatching his passport back and saying, "I will not let you do this to me just because I'm black. You are racist." And that stuck with me. I was like, race? What's a racist? And growing up, I began to become more conscious of these things. But the thing is, I grew up in Nigeria, where everybody looked like me. Well, not everybody. We have white Nigerians, Chinese Nigerians, Russians, and so on. But we were the majority. So growing up my whole life, I grew up in a middle-class family. My dad's a doctor. My mom is a businesswoman. Most of my relatives are politicians and soldiers. So that kind of oppression, I grew up not seeing. I've never, throughout the first half of my life, I was never a second-class citizen in any way, shape, or form. I then moved to England as a tradition when you come of age in my family. I'm sorry, am I taking too long?
No, go for it.
So when you come of age in my family, we believe it's important for men to go and almost a hijrah, so to speak, where you go and become your own man, whether it's in another country or another state, and you learn to stand on your own 2 feet. And for me, this was because I was born in England. The natural journey was to come to England to further my education, which I did. Now, I come here. Now, keep in mind, I come from northern Nigeria, where we've had Islam for over 1,000 years. On every street in my hometown, you're going to find an average of 2 to 3 masajid, right? You're going to find madrasas. You're going to find Most our currency has Arabic on it. All our food is halal. Alcohol is illegal. If you steal in certain areas and you steal something that you don't need to steal, your hand will be cut off. We've got a choice of Sharia courts or regular courts in Nigeria. I'm not saying that it's the perfect Sharia, but they're trying.
Yeah.
We've got I think the oldest sultanate in the world still exists in northern Nigeria, or at least the oldest one in Africa. We have emirs, we have all of that. I come from a rich Islamic culture and history, and so it's very much my blackness or my Africanness and my Islam are the same to me.
Mm-hmm.
They're not things I separate, and I'm going to bring back that point when in a moment. So I come to England now, and I come in, and I notice that most black people here are not Muslim, which is already a strange thing to me because back home, everybody's, there were Christians, but it's not out of the norm to be black and Muslim. I come here and I came to England, 2005? So at a time when, the whole dawah thing hadn't spread too much around among black Muslims, it was still a little bit wishy-washy,
Mm-hmm.
And my salams are not being responded to. I'm praying in a masjid with better tajweed than the imam, and he's still asking me if I'm a Muslim after salah. And, on top of that, there's this open system of white supremacy here in England that I noticed because I'm not from here. I didn't grow up here, so it's not the norm for me to get thrown on the floor by police.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the norm for me to walk into a shop and people assume I'm a thief. These things are not the norm. It's not the norm for people to assume I'm not educated. I've had people say, "Oh wow, you're more articulate than I thought you would be." Of course I'm articulate. I went to school. So these things, these stereotypes, these preconceived notions of what I'm supposed to be like because I'm black, are things I then encountered here in England, and they enraged me, right? And I found that the most racist demographic of people that I interacted with were Pakistanis. It was endemic. Everywhere, every masjid I went to, there was just this sense of superiority, inherent sense of superiority there's racism in every community to a degree. Well, not racism, but prejudice in every community to a degree. But I just found that the masjids, it was ridiculous. And I met black brothers who were Muslim, alhamdulillah, mashallah, reverts. Well, new Muslims, I don't like the term revert. And I saw the way these guys were treated, even though they were more practicing than the guys, the so-called status quo of Muslims in the country. And it's something that never sat well with me.
Mm-hmm.
And as I went into as life took me into the path I'm on, speaking publicly and so on, and being a so-called public figure, I found, I need to talk about this because it's a problem. Because, right, for example, like most black men, I have non-Muslim friends who are black. And the first thing they use as an excuse to not become Muslim, the thing is, I'm very open with my beliefs when it comes to Islam. Even though people think, "Oh, haram, he does comedy," I'm very, very open. Other people around me know not to bring certain things into my space.
Mm-hmm.
I've had black people come say, "Brother, you're very, we like how conscious you are, but, why are you a Muslim? Don't you realize this religion hates us? It teaches people they hate us. They hate us." This is why I hear.
Let me just stop you there for a minute, because I wanted to get into the discussion, because we're getting into it very quickly already. Before we continue, I want to make it clear to everyone that I want to get the most out of this conversation and this interview. And because of that, as the format of this program, KeenOnDeen, the format is very similar to what we know as Hard Talk, whereby I will be the devil's advocate. So I'm not here to interview Nabil and wave the flag of Nabil. I'm here to interview Nabil, and I want to dig deeper into what he's saying. I want to scratch the surface. So off the bat, I want to say to everyone, don't hate on me. I'm not here to wave anybody's flag. I'm here just to get beyond what Nabil is saying and to give alternatives, give suggestions, give you could say, just to open up the discussion a bit more. So I may ask things that I don't necessarily believe. I may ask things in a way which may be contrary to Islam, but it's not to put forward any idea. It's more to get into it. So as we were talking about issue of racism already, the first question I want to ask you, and you've already kind of begun it as well, is regards to the brother's statement, brothers from up north, and we'll also organise an interview with the same brother, so he will have his chance to voice his opinions at some point. And the brother's name is Abu Ibrahim Husnain, and basically he was addressing some youth, and he said, To them, as mentioned earlier on, stop being black brothers, speak in a nice, calm manner, and so on and so forth. So, what I wanted to ask, the first question I want to ask you, Brother Nabil, is that when you heard this statement, how did that statement make you feel? What went through your mind when you heard this statement?
I felt a wave of anger go through my body when I heard this statement because, you know, what he said, brothers, we are not black. Stop talking like you are black. Talk in a decent way with decent manners. Now, I talk for a living, so I break down. You know, I love language and etymology. I break down what people say. We are not black. Let's not talk like we're black. Talk in a decent way with decent manners. So first of all, we are not black. That sentence there, yeah. Let's not talk like we're black. So talking like we're black is indecent. The way black people talk is not. Brother, I'm talking to you right now. Even people who hate me, listening to me talk right now, would they say the way I talk is indecent?
I mean, you could. The brother may argue that he didn't mean every black demographic.
Brother, just what he said. Because if we didn't put pressure on him, he wouldn't break it down. So just off of what he said, because obviously I would like to assume that if you're a da'i, you're going to prepare what you say before you go out and present it to your audience. Because I'm a speaker, I know for a fact that before I speak, I prepare what I'm going to say to some degree before I really reveal it to my audience. So that was the best representation of what he had to say, unless we're going to assume that this brother goes out and tries to give da'wah without preparing and takes and wings it. And I would hate to believe that a da'i as established as Abu Ibrahim would be ill-prepared to speak to his audience.
Mm-hmm.
So thinking the best of my brother Abu Ibrahim, I'm going to assume that he worded it that way for a reason.
Now, so in your mind then, you said it upset you and enraged you, but did you understand from what he meant by that? He was talking about black people who have a gang mentality, have a road mentality.
Nope. Because here's the thing: if that was what he meant, then he would have said we're not criminals. Stop talking like we're criminals. Because here's the thing: why now? It's something I know for a fact that in many Pakistani homes, when a child comes home behaving a certain way, they say, "Why are you behaving like a Kala?" Or there's too many Kale in your school. Kala being a very derogatory term for black people, because they attribute a negative set of behavioral patterns to black people. Now, one of the definitions of racism is to attribute negative behavioral patterns to an entire race. He attributed criminality to an entire race, and this is very dangerous because, like I said before, institutional racism means that as black men, we are 36 times more likely to be harassed by police than any white man in this country. We're likely to get double the sentences that white people in this country get. We're also way more likely to get killed by police, even in the UK. And it's because of things like this that is a reality and that nobody bats an eyelid when we get our heads beaten in by police. Because when you say, I saw some black boys outside, automatically, it's almost like people are programmed to think that there's crime. Now, I worked security for a while, and I heard many bouncers say that, naturally, when you see a group of white boys out, or it's a group of lads, a group of Asian boys, it's a group of lads, group of black boys, gang. So this language he uses is very hurtful to our shabab. It's very hurtful to our youth because it perpetuates an idea. Now the next thing is this was Lady Pool Road in Birmingham. And Birmingham is one of the most racially unintegrated parts of the UK. Look how many race riots they have. How many have we had in London between black people and Asians? None that I can think of. Whereas Birmingham has had several. Now in a place like Birmingham, you're standing on the street telling a group of hundreds of South Asian men, as a man who's holy, so they're seeing you with a beard, as far as they're concerned, you're religious, right? You're a man of sunnah. And you're openly saying to them that they should not be like a people who most of them do not even interact with because the community is so segregated in Birmingham, right? So the only contact they're having with black people by proxy is the words of this da'i. And he is putting forth the idea that black people are inherently criminal. And I had a problem with that.
Okay, so when you heard this statement, what was the first thing you felt you had to do?
I said, I live my life by, my understanding of the saying that when you see something wrong, you see an injustice, you should change it with your hands. If you can't change it with your hands, then you should speak out against it. And if you cannot, then you should feel anger in your heart. But that is the smallest or the least amount of faith, right? So immediately I was like, no, I can't let him get away with this. We must do something. He must be brought to account for what he has said. That's the first thing. I was like, this man must be brought to account for what he has said. This we cannot leave this to go unchecked, because this happens too much behind closed doors. This happens in schools, in offices when we were applying for jobs, in estate agents' offices when you're trying to look for somewhere to live. These kind of conversations happen about black people, but we can't do anything about it. So the one time you catch one of these people saying these things openly, that is a blessing, because you can then counter, you can then take, not vengeance, but get justice for it and make an example out of this person for what they're doing.
Okay, so I mean, when this first happened, one of the first things I did was to discuss with some of my students and friends, Asian and non-Asian, about the topic, and some people understood what you said, were agreeing with what you said. Some people were disagreeing with what you said. Some people didn't see that. Some people didn't see it was even important. But one thing that I wanted to bring early in this discussion, as it relates to what we're going to say later, or what we're going to discuss later, is to get through the discussion of how you reacted, because I felt that if we can't get beyond that hurdle or that wall, people won't take their fingers out of their ears. I mean, I said to some brothers, "Did you not listen to what he said?" And the brother said, how can I listen to someone who calls me Bani Ganesh, who calls me, who insults my mother, or says this, says that? So some of the ways in which you reacted, people felt it was extreme. Some people thought it was over the top, and they couldn't get beyond that part. I mean, could you just give some feedback on how you reacted? And did you feel it was productive, or do you think it was counterproductive?
First of all, of course I feel it's productive, because he apologized, didn't he? He's been pulled up on it, hasn't he? And it's opened up the doors for discussion. So, and also, I've got friends in places of influence who never understood how bad racism was. I'll mention his name. Yeah, Asim Qureshi, for example, one of the main directors of Cage, right? This is a very influential Asian person. He got into a discussion with people in different organizations who he wouldn't name initially. And he told them that, look, anti-blackness is a problem, and look at this situation, and look at all the comments, the racist comments that this brother is getting because of what he's done. And they said, no, we don't believe racism really is that much of a problem in our community. Asim, may Allah preserve him, then went through his phone book and called every single black person except for me on his phone book and asked them about their experiences from the Asian community. These are people, by the way, this is Asim, so most of his friends are going to be very successful entrepreneurs. They're going to be successful speakers. They're going to be, people who are like the creme de la creme of black Muslims. And he said he was so horrified. He was on the phone for 10 hours. This is the guy who deals with, the kind of cases he deals with, severe cases, people being tortured. This guy said he was horrified to hear what he heard from successful black Muslims. And he said what horrified him the most is the fact that Asian Muslims that do these things go back to their masjid, even if they experience racism, they're going to go back to their masjid or their community where they're the majority and feel okay, right? Whereas the stuff we suffer, we have to go back to work tomorrow or back into the masjid tomorrow, yeah? And after that, he went back to his friends and told them of these experiences, and there has been a flooding online of Asians coming out and now saying, after these recent events, even Asians who hate me, they say, you know what, Nabil has a point, anti-blackness is a problem. Now, regarding the things I said, Bani Ganesh, I've discussed with a mutual friend of ours who is a person of knowledge, and he said that he understands why I use it, and given the context with why I call people that, and the particular people I call that, there is no problem. Now, for those who do not know, the inspiration for that term, which actually came from an Asian, was this. Now, I remember the story that we see around of Abdur-Rashid supposedly calling Bilal son of a black mother, which is a factual statement, son of an Oromo woman or Habashi woman, which is a factual statement. It's not even like he called him nigger, abid, kala. He just called him you son of a black woman, right? And Bilal radiallahu anhu went to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and reported this. And Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam castigated Abdur-Rashid radiallahu anhu so heavily that Abdur-Rashid went back to Bilal and even put his head on the floor and told Bilal to step on his head as a sign of humility. Now look at this. In Arab culture, pointing your foot at another human being is a massive insult. Huge, huge insult. And obviously, we know the Sahaba, men of Tawheed, to bow down to a human being. That is not something that they would do. These guys would never bow to anyone, and they weren't cowards either. But he was so humiliated by what he said, he put his head down. And you know why he was humiliated? Because Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam told him, "O Abu Dhar, you are a man who has the jahil traits of old within you." And those jahil traits were from paganism. Those jahil traits were from paganism. Now, if we are Bani Adam, how can somebody be superior to another person if we have the same father? So, for me, if you're a South Asian, and you feel it's okay to say the things the South Asians say generally about black people, and not all of them, but it's a cultural thing. It's past the dinner table test in South Asian culture. And my proof for that is that nobody pulled up Abu Ibrahim on the street that day except for two black brothers that were with him. Now, if you are telling me that you feel better than me, and you're going to, even when I show you hadiths, continue to be racist and continue to look down on black people based on your culture, then you're choosing your culture over Islam, and you're saying we don't have the same father, and you're not Bani Adam. So jokingly, tongue-in-cheek, I coined the term, okay, if you're not Bani Adam, you must be Bani Ganesh, because that's the only way you can say we're not from the same place and we're not equal.
So you're saying that
Now,
the term Bani Ganesh was not directed towards all Asians, it was directed towards
course not.
Asians that have these racist traits.
Of course not. I don't need to tell you why it would be very stupid for me to insult all Asians, considering the fact that my children are half Asian. Right? Not that that's even a reason you can be racist and marry from another race. But if I thought every single Asian was the descendant of a half human being, half elephant, and non-existent deity, that would be a problem. You'd have to question my sanity considering I'm married to one. So no, it's not about all Asians. It's about a particular kind of Asian who is a racist and takes their culture above their religion, or believes that when you attack their culture or aspects of their culture, you're attacking Islam. Meanwhile, they can't differentiate between the religion and Islam.
Okay, Nabil, you've explained yourself that you've justified the use of Bani Ganesh, but at the same time, you do find in the Quran where Allah says, "La tanabazu bil alqab," don't call names to one another. So
yeah, that's true. I agree. And this is the thing. I'm a man of satire. I'm a man of sarcasm and things like that. Sometimes to make a point, and the thing is, a lot of South Asians actually use the term too. If you've been on my social media, you'll see the majority of the South Asians who follow me, and that's a lot, and a lot of people who share my posts actually find the term funny and don't take it offensive. The people who tend to take it offensive tend to be people who have a culture bias, and the thing is, the first person to actually come up with the term wasn't even me. It was a South Asian, but he was saying Abdul Krishna, and I thought, no, that doesn't sound right. Bani Ganesh has a better ring to it, and it does. It rolls off Bani Ganesh. It rolls off the tongue.
all right, fair enough. All right, how about the other issue there, man? You mentioned, I think your a very initial post where you mentioned words like munafiq and other stuff. That was very, you could say, divisive, very harsh.
Yes, it was very harsh, and I do regret saying that. I do. Unfortunately, I blocked from my profile where that was made. If not, I would edit that out and apologize for it. But I do not apologize for my anger. And in anger, we say things. Now, what I find problematic about South Asians who are angry with me, not all South Asians, but the ones who are angry with me, is that they're deflecting from the point by saying, "Oh yeah, Nabil shouldn't have said all these things." Well, if everybody said what they were supposed to say, I wouldn't be angry in the first place, because this guy wouldn't be saying that I'm a criminal and I speak indecently, and that my grandmother, my grandfather, my father, my children are indecent just because they're black. So, and then also, even if I myself am a racist, and I myself am vile, and I'm all these things they're saying I am, it doesn't detract from the point. Because this racism issue is still a big deal. Yes, they're going to see Bani Ganesh on Facebook one day and get angry. They'll continue living their life as the status quo majority Muslims in this country. Whereas the black people who are sharing this and who are happy that I've spoken about this issue and who are sharing the videos and sharing the posts, they will continue to live their lives as people who are second, if not third class citizens, minorities within a minority in the UK. And I feel that if the most racism you've ever experienced is that some black guy online that you've never met may or may not have called you a particular name, you have privileges, right? We get turned away from masjids. We get called horrible names. Our children get treated worse in certain madrasas than other children. I know a boy who went to a madrasa in South London, not far from where you sometimes see me, and he said that his whole life, while he was in a particular madrasa, he grew up being called Kala and didn't even know what it meant. Until years later, when somebody explained to him what Kala meant, he was Somali. He was the only black kid in his madrasa. We live in a time where I don't feel comfortable leaving my kids in an Asian majority masjid or school or madrasa because of all the horror stories that I hear. I can't.
But don't you feel that maybe this affair couldn't have been addressed in a more quieter or a more calmer manner? Maybe even private. Maybe private message him.
No, he made this statement publicly, so I dealt with it publicly because it's important that people who believe Islam teaches racism see that we get angry about these things, and that it does not represent our religion. Because even if I speak to him privately, like two brothers already did before he released the video, so even being advised by two people, which he supposedly respects, he still did not take down this video. He was still happy to put it out. He didn't edit out this part of the video. It wasn't removed from the video. He didn't apologize before I did what I did. It was only after. So the argument that he should have been advised privately does not work, because he was advised privately by two separate individuals and several more after I put out the video before he decided to make his apology. And his first apology was pathetic. So that being said, you want to talk about peaceful? Well, I've got a body of work to my name. There are literally dozens, if not hundreds of videos of me talking about different things. And you'll see when it comes to the topic of racism, every time it's brought up, the same deflections come out. They have textbook answers for everything you say. Oh, brother, no racism in Islam. One Ummah, Bilal was black. These are the stock answers they give you. This conversation is avoided at all costs by racists. Racism isn't an accident. It's convenient for people. There's a reason why racism, especially systemic racism, exists. So, when you talk about something nicely, I even made a video after this one that we're talking about, where I was polite, specifically polite, and it didn't go viral because I didn't offend. It wasn't outrageous. I've discussed this topic so many times, and I can show you a correlation between videos where I'm angry or posts where I'm angry and posts where I'm nice. And unfortunately, the Muslims have been affected by the society that we live in so much so that we only like it when we see rage and outrage and anger. That's why Muslims are reactive and not proactive. We only do things when we're offended, but we don't do things to maintain. We will try to rebuild something. Sorry, I've got a chest infection.
No problem.
So yeah, it's a problem, bro. So no, I don't think a quiet, peaceful, post or whatever would have done the job.
So on the issue of being proactive in the community, would you be prepared to? Do you try to tackle the issues of racism with Asian people and with Arab people? All the Arabs are still part of Asia. Do you work with them also to tackle with racism, or are you more of the stance like Malcolm X, whereby black issues of racism should be dealt with by black people and non-black people shouldn't get involved?
I have a pragmatic approach, right? Because these are general terms. So you have to ask, what are the aspects of racism? Certain aspects of racism need to be dealt with by black people. For example, the fact that we are sitting ducks when it comes to institutional targeting and sanctions of a financial nature from certain infrastructures. So like jobs, we're not being given jobs in certain places, or we're not being treated properly in certain masajid or in certain schools. For those situations, I think as black people, we need to build our own. I believe in self-determination. We need to have our own businesses. We need to be economically strong and stable and self-sufficient in those areas. However, for certain issues where, for example, that is not possible, I think for certain issues where, for example, it's common practice among, certain communities for women to be, and men to be excommunicated from their families because they marry from another race, or it's common practice for charities to not send money or as much money to certain countries, or not make as much effort to fundraise for certain countries. In those situations, if you're an Asian and you're not a racist and you're not a Bani Ganesh, then you need to go and speak to your own people. If you're at home and you hear your parents calling black people Kala, Shidi, and Bandar and all of that, you need to tell them that it's wrong and you need to correct that. You don't you don't say, oh, it's the older generation. Because no matter how old your generation is of your parents, they're not older than Abdur-Rashid. So if back then racism was being pulled up, why is it now all of a sudden these people think their parents are too special to be pulled up on racism?
Okay, so on that issue then, let's go back to the first question, which was about the video. So you mentioned that you wasn't happy with the video, it enraged you, it upset you. Just very briefly, if you could summarize what exactly in what he said upset you, if you could define it.
I can't summarize it any further because it's a 15-second video, brother. What annoyed me is that he insinuated that black people, one, are a generic culture, and that culture is inherently criminal and indecent.
Okay, but the brother said in a counter video and even in a written statement that he didn't mean that. It was a slip of the tongue. And I think there are a lot of people who are actually coming out and saying, brother, why are we dealing with and taking this issue such a big situation, making such a big thing out of it when it was a slip of the tongue. It was, as I say, zealot lisan. I mean, why can't you accept that as an answer? Why can't it be an answer?
For several reasons. One, that's a very long slip of the tongue. That's a very, very, very... I'll give you an example of a slip of the tongue, right? A Christian man had a wedding, right? And he said, I would like to spank the bridesmaids. He said, oops, sorry, I mean thank. That is a slip of the tongue. What he did was, he specifically said, it wasn't a word, it was a sentence, yeah? And it was thought out and spoken slowly. He said, we are not black. Let's not talk like we are black. Let us talk like we have manners and talk in a decent way, right? That was thought out. He reasoned it. Remember, I'm a man who talks for a living. I know the difference between a mistake and someone thinking through what they're saying. Yeah, he said, let us talk in a way that is decent with decent manners. So he insinuated that black people are indecent or do not have decent manners. Then before his video apology, he made a status, right, where he further said that yes, he now alluded how some people talk like Tupac and Biggie. That's nonsense. In Birmingham, they do not talk like American rappers. If you know any Asian brother from Birmingham that's a bit urban, you'll find that they sound completely different to the black boys there. They have their own slang, their own street culture. Yes, maybe 20, 30 years ago, the Jamaican patois influenced it. But now, African language has influenced the street talk in London as much as Asians have. We say things like kushti, right? So the fact that they single out only the black influence on urban culture, which I will admit is quite strong, and then insinuate that anybody who speaks a certain way is a criminal is also classism. Because, for example, Abu Bakr Islam, Musa al-Ugandi, right? These brothers speak in an urban manner when they talk to their audiences, but they're not criminals. There's some decent, upstanding members of society. Khalid Yassin, who's American, he sounds, he speaks with a bit of jab. Assalamu alaikum, brother. There's nothing wrong with that. That's the way they speak. The Sahaba and almost every prophet that we've ever had, except for Suleiman, who was a king, was a working class man. Isa was supposed to be a carpenter. Many of our prophets were shepherds. These were working class men. So by today's standards, they would have sounded like they came from the lower class. They wouldn't have sounded posh. They wouldn't have. So why is it now we have classism where it's okay to look down on brothers who sound like they come from inner city London or inner city Birmingham? It's classist, and you're making brothers feel that there's something wrong with them just because maybe they weren't educated a certain way or they speak like they come from a certain environment. And then on top of that, you're pairing that mode of speech with only black people and labeling it as indecent. There are loads of people who speak urban and are still very polite and very courteous. They just speak urban. There's nothing wrong with it.
Okay, so on that note, then, I think this is a very important question. I think it's probably the most important question of the whole interview. And the reason I say it's important because when I was discussing with another friend of mine, he's an Asian brother even, the answers that was given by him and myself was different. And if there are different answers, it will cause the discussion to be different. The question is, what is racism? In your mind, what would be the definition? If you could give a definitive definition of racism so that we could all agree on and say this is wrong and whatnot, what would you say racism is?
Twofold. One, racism is a set of beliefs that a race is inherently inferior to other races and that it is okay for that race to be discriminated against on the basis of this inferiority, right? This inferiority may be based on a bunch of negative and inherent stereotypes, so stupidity, violence, ugliness, whatever, right? Now, systemic racism is the organized, conscious, and active discrimination against a group of people based on their heritage. So, yeah, that's my definition of racism.
So,
would you like an example?
No, I'll come to the example in a minute. So how about someone who suggests to you that racism is kind of what you said, but it's whereby hatred is ingrained in that, whereas if someone doesn't hate them, then it's not racism, i.e. a white supremacist...
I know exactly what you're saying, and I would say that that's nonsense. You can be racist against somebody and not hate them. Abdur-Rashid made a racist comment to Bilal. He didn't hate Bilal, but he made a racist comment. You can be racist towards people and actually love them. For example, when I was younger, I used to own dogs, right? German Shepherd. I had a beautiful German Shepherd. I loved that dog. The trouble is, I didn't view that dog as my equal intellectually. because it was a dog, right?
Fair enough.
Now, your Asian friend might love you. I'm not saying this particular friend, but just in theory, you might have an Asian friend that might love you, think you're a wonderful person, right? But he thinks that you're black, and so you're inherently less intelligent than him. The current head of the KKK, I think, was Donald Duke, says he doesn't hate black people. He loves black people. He says black people make great athletes. However, they're just not intelligent compared to white people, and as such, they should not be given roles in certain jobs. Would you not say that that's a bit racist?
Okay, so the scope of racism goes beyond the issue of hatred, and this is important
Absolutely.
because
Do you have to hate men to be a sexist?
okay, I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying.
Most sexists are married to women.
Mm-hmm. So you're saying, would you say racism is of two levels then? A level whereby aggression is given, like for example, like lynching of black people or whatnot, and then there's a subtle, more relaxed form of racism whereby I don't hate you, I work with you, but I wouldn't want to marry you, kind of thing. Is that the kind of thing?
To be honest with you, somebody can be racist and want to marry you because they have a fetish. That's how deep it is. They might just, because some of the negative stereotypes or the stereotypes attributed to black people are stereotypes that have actually even been of some benefit. For example, better athletes, sexual prowess, attractiveness, but still not equal to white people. There are lots of white people who have fetishes, who are KKK members, far-right extremist group members, but still marry a black person, which is why I feel hatred should not even be included in our understanding of racism, because the same way we know that there are people who are khawarij, but they've never killed anybody. You know, not because they wouldn't want to, but because maybe they don't have the means to, or they're a coward, or maybe they're just not violent. So they just have khariji views, but they haven't acted upon it. You know?
Okay, so based on that then, based on your experience, actually, you mentioned something about examples of racism. So you can mention some examples?
Yeah, sure. So, for example, you had, let's look at, I'm a man, you like history, so my brother, let's talk some history. You look at South Africa, there was an apartheid system. Apartheid meant that the white man was on top, then the white man was on top, then it was Asians, then it was the colored, and then it was the indigenous black people, right? Now, what that meant was white people got the best land, the best education, were not lynched, were not killed. Asians got that just after what the white people got. The coloreds got just less than what the Asians got, and black people got basically nothing, and we were also lynched, killed, raped, and so on. Yes? Now, there is a meal, there's a dish in South Africa, you normally get it in Durban, it's called bunny chow, right? Now, bunny chow is a loaf that looks something like hard-dough bread, and then you cut it open, inside the bread, there's curry, right? Now, don't worry, I'm going somewhere with this. The origin of this meal is because the Indians who lived initially in South Africa were called Banya, right? And Banya used to give child. They weren't allowed to serve black, servants regular food. They were not. So what they would do is they would just make it look like they were giving them bread, but really they hid curry inside the bread, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that is a beautiful, beautiful. Doesn't that touch your heart a little bit?
Mm-hmm.
You know that people did that. However, those same Asians, those same Indians in South Africa still thought that black people deserved to be where they were. 80% of the people who benefited from apartheid voted to keep apartheid. Now, let me show you how major that is. Whenever people say Germany, subconsciously, what's the first thing you think?
Hitler?
From a history perspective, Hitler, right?
Yeah.
What percentage of Germans voted for the NSDAP or the Nazi Party?
No, I'm not sure.
I know, 36.5% of Germans voted for the Nazi Party. A minority. Yet they're still stigmatized with this horrible man's legacy. 80% of white and Asian South Africans supported apartheid.
Okay, so on that note then, just to be clear on that, there was discrimination against black people in South Africa, as an example you gave. So would you also say that a discrimination against whites in South Africa, as some claim that is happening right now, is also an example of racism? I think just recently they wanted to repatriate.
I know the case. No, I wouldn't, because here's the thing. Islamically, if you steal something from me, what is the ruling?
It's returned back to you.
From me, and I can still see it. What's the ruling?
Return back to you.
Exactly. 94% of South Africa's wealth is divided among the white minority in South Africa. I was in South Africa recently. I was in KwaZulu-Natal doing some work with sex abuse victims at the school in Harding. So yeah, in KwaZulu-Natal. And the poverty that these people live in, I'm sorry, but it's the worst I've ever seen in my life. They live, like, just round the corner, you've got cities that are more beautiful than parts of Europe. But then the majority of black people live in shanty towns. I nearly got into a bit of a tussle with a Boer, a white South African, because he saw me and assumed that I was a servant, you know? In fact, let me tell you something horrifying. I was walking through the streets of South Africa, and I was with white people, but I got stared at the most. And somebody came up to me and said, "Bra, are you Nigerian or American?" I said, "How do you know I'm either?" He said, "Because you're too big to be a South African." You know why? Because these people grew up for so long eating bad food that even though Zulus were initially a warrior race, we know about Shaka Zulu, these people genetically have now become smaller than they're supposed to be. So the average Zulu man is actually quite skinny. Most of the black South African players in the rugby team are brought home from Zimbabwe. These people actually altered the genetics of an entire race of people through malnutrition, right? And they're still living in this country. Nothing was done. Nelson Mandela initially claimed that, you know, he would give money back and whatnot to South Africans who were robbed of their land and of their money. And now, all of a sudden, you know, when he got freed, he couldn't do it because these people, you know, when someone's stolen billions, it's very difficult as a man with none to get the money back. So you can't tell me that it's just that people who have wealth gotten from murder and bloodshed should be allowed to have this wealth.
But I mean, the same could be said about the whole of the North America and the South Americas. I mean, that was gained through bloodshed. Are we to suggest that we should take away all the wealth and money that people as in basically what they're trying to say is that should we penalize a generation who didn't do the crime for crimes that were committed generations ago?
It wasn't that long ago. Many of these people were adults during the time of apartheid. They just inherited it. Many of these people were conscious. Many South Africans still remember. Bro, I sat down with somebody that was in prison with Nelson Mandela when I was in South Africa. I was there. Like, I mean, it's still visible. And in fact, even apartheid still exists in South Africa. It's just unofficial. So, to me, if you stole something 50 years ago, I still think I have a right to take it back.
So, back to the issue of racism in our community.
Can I ask you one question?
Go for it.
So, what's your stance on the Palestine-Israel conflict? What do you think would
Palestine-Israel?
Yeah.
What Palestine-Israel conflict?
But what's your stance on that? Do you think that Palestinians, if let's say tomorrow we could do whatever we felt was right to help with that situation, would it be wrong to return land to Palestinians?
I mean, the issue of Palestine, I think it's like you said, it's the issue of something which was taken from someone who's actually alive and returning it back to them. That's more understandable, if some might say it's more understandable or palatable than something that was taken 400 years ago, 200 years ago.
South Africa wasn't, this issue of wealth wasn't 400 years. Look at when the Boer Wars were. Look up how recently apartheid got ended. It wasn't that long ago. And also, there's this misconception about things like colonialization, that, it wasn't that long ago. And in fact, a lot of the banking systems and whatnot that still exist now are directly off the back of that. For example, Haiti, the first black country ever to gain independence, still pays money to France to apologize for gaining their independence because France lost money in the war that they lost to Haiti. So, you know, when we look at that, when we say the rhetoric, it was a long time ago, it sounds good. But when you look at what's actually happening, countries like, for example, my homeland, Nigeria and whatnot, we had our economy sabotaged by certain countries intentionally so that we pay riba to these countries for allowing us to be free after they've already stolen from us in the first place. So when you look at these systems, you can't blame people for, if they have the chance to actually undo some of the damage, trying it. Because the reason South Africa is such an unsafe place, the reason why there's so much poverty, is a direct result of how the wealth was distributed and how the wealth was first taken.
Okay, so I mean, so the point taken on that one. Back to the issue of our problem we got in the local community with regards to this statement and how reverts are treated in our community. Do you believe, this is a question, do you believe that there is a stereotype of black people in the Muslim community? When I say Muslim community, I mean the Muslim community who were born into Islam, from
Yes.
Asian descent.
Yes, absolutely. It's a huge...
And do you think that stereotype is justified?
No, I don't believe it's justified. I don't believe it's justified to
And I mean, the reason why I asked that question is because I've spoken to people about this stereotype, and their response was pretty much being, but that's true, isn't it?
Yeah, well, then I question the sanity and education level of those people, because that's not true. Statistics will show you that certain crimes are committed across the board. And even if, for example, because of unfair policing policies and institutional racism, black people are harassed more. Like, if you do sociology, you find black people, again, if you're 36 times more likely to get stopped, that means for every one white person stopped, 36 black people get stopped for the same crime, or for no reason at all. Of course, you're going to have more black people going to jail. It doesn't mean that black people are more criminal. In fact, studies show that white people are more likely to be in possession of drugs than black people. Yeah, legit. I could actually post the links for you later. So, no, it's not justified. And only somebody who only goes by biased media would believe that. Anybody who, and as Muslims, we're supposed to seek knowledge, right? Anybody who actually looks for it. Because if that's the case, then are people justified to believe that all Muslims are terrorists? Are they justified to believe that we're all honor killers and we're all rapists and groomers because of what the newspapers say? Of course not.
So you don't believe that Muslims... Sorry. So you don't believe that Muslims who have those views, whether it's from the media or from hearsay, you don't think they have a level of excuse for that?
You have even less excuse than a non-Muslim, because as a Muslim, you already know what it's like for people spreading misinformation about you. And the same sources of misinformation about Islam tend to be the ones that spread misinformation about black people.
Okay.
So have no excuse, especially if you know that your religion teaches you that racism is the worst possible sin. Dude, racism is the first sin. It's the sunnah of shaitan. That is literally what it was. You're made from clay, I'm made from fire, I won't bow to you, I don't respect you. That is the first act of racism ever. So to me, as a Muslim, knowing very well that it's the sunnah, people will get on you if you wear Nike trousers or whatever, or Nike shoes, because, that's some goddess, right? But then they don't feel weird that they're doing something that the first person to ever do it was shaitan. He copyrighted racism. So, no, they don't have any excuse to be racist whatsoever. Absolutely, especially if they're from an ethnic minority themselves, like they're Asian or Arab, with the amount of negativity in the media.
Okay then, so in regards to the issue of racism then, or issues of the stereotypes, do you feel that these stereotypes, I mean, like I said, you just define racism on a scale of thinking you're better than someone else. Do you feel that this stereotype of this demographic, they do this, and that demographic that they do this, do you think that manifests itself in in our daily lives?
Of course. You ever walked into a shop before, smiling as a black man? Huh? You ever tried to stop?
I mean, let me give you an example of my own self, and hopefully this doesn't take away my status of being devil's advocate. But just the other day, there was a bike parked outside the centre, and it was locked up. And in the actual lock was the person's keys. So the keys to the lock and their personal keys was actually in the lock. Now, I knew I had to do something about it. But I thought to myself, I stopped and I thought to myself, what's going to happen next when I put my hand on that key to return it back to the owner? And it's not a nice way to live or to think, but it is the reality we live. So I literally put my hands up. I picked the key up like this, and I held the key in the air and walked to the local shop. And I said, someone left the keys inside the lock, and it was someone in the shop, and I gave back the keys. But yes, I mean that does happen, and it happens enough to the point whereby I acted that way.
Live different.
Yeah.
We have to live different.
We have to live differently. We have to act differently. And I even remember the earliest time when I was with my friend. I had my two best friends at the time, and I was about 10 or 11. One was Filipino, one was Sikh. And something went missing. And they were looking for it, couldn't find it, and then they decided to ask me what.
Because my wife and daughter are here, and I don't want to disturb them.
Okay.
So, oh goodness. It's family life.
Don't worry.
Yeah. And yeah, that's another stereotype for you.
So when
an absent father.
So when it went missing, the first thing they decided to do is ask me where it is, and they decided that I had taken it. And they were quite adamant that I had taken it, and that was probably the earliest memory I have. Just like you had early memory of racism, I think that was probably the earliest memory I have of racism, whereby my own best friends accused me of taking it, and I'm their best friend. But
Yeah.
but in saying that, like I said, some of these stereotypes that people have, like I said, in being devil's advocate, some of these stereotypes people have, sometimes they're based on experiences. Maybe they were in an area, they were harassed, or they've seen black people on the road, they've seen them act this way or act that way, and they form a picture. So they say in defense, brother, why are you discriminating? Why are you hating on me for thinking this way when that's all I've seen? For example, I mean, how would you answer that kind of answer?
So again, we have to look at this. Nobody has ever grown up in an area and it was only one people committing. I mean, for example, if you grew up in a majority black area, the majority of the criminals will be black. No? However, if you live in Bradford, the majority of the criminals will be Asian. If you live in Glasgow, the majority of the criminals will be Asian. If you live it just goes off who the poorest and most discriminated against are. Those are the people who deny. If you go to Addiscombe, majority of the criminals will be white. It's just how it goes. So I feel, yeah, maybe if you're a certain age, that then you can have that sort of mentality. But once you reach adulthood and you have the ability to do some research, or you just have a sound mind, that should be common sense. I don't have two heads, but I know this. So why is it that these people think they can hide behind that excuse?
Okay, on the flip side then, do you believe that black people have a racist idea or not racist idea, sorry, wrong word, have a stereotype towards Arabs and Asians? Do we also exhibit the same kind of stereotypes, do you reckon, towards Asians and
The thing I'll
Arabs?
say is this: we're not. There's no monolith to black people because, unlike Pakistanis and South Asians I'm addressing, we black people don't have a common culture in this country. So, which group of black people are you talking about? Nigerians, Jamaicans, Ghanaians? What kind of Nigerian are you talking about? Hausa, Igbo, Yoruba, Fulani?
But I mean, one could argue that the question is not necessarily about a specific demographic. The idea is, okay, Asians might have racism, white people might have racism, but don't black people also have racism?
We do not have any system or set of beliefs established anywhere in Africa, the Caribbean, or here that discriminates against Asians. In fact, if you look at it, the biggest problem black people have is that we're too welcoming to other cultures. For example, I'm not justifying it, I'm not praising it or glorifying it or saying it's halal, but the music industry, black music is everybody's music. Everybody listens to rap, and anybody can rap, and black rappers will allow anybody to rap among them. Nollywood movies will happily feature a foreigner, right? A Bollywood movie will not, and if you're a black person in a Bollywood movie, you're going to be a thief and be in there for 3 seconds as Amitabh Bachchan punches you in the face. If you look at any establishment or any industry that is made by Asians, you will find it is not inclusive to other cultures. If you look at the same for Arabs, again, not inclusive really to other cultures, except maybe institutions of religion, and even in those there are accounts of racism, but let's not go into that because that would upset people. So, no, bro, I don't believe. If you go to Nigeria, for example, there are Indians living in Nigeria peacefully. If you go to Tanzania, many of these Asians gained their wealth the same way white people did because they were helping the colonizers when they came to Africa and were the opportunity. The black people were not given out. There is a group of black people that are found in Makran, and they're called the Shidi. They are descendants of African nobility and warriors who came over to South Asia, the Indian subcontinent, hundreds of years ago. Most of them are Muslim. The term Shidi actually comes from Sidi, which is a Sufi term of endearment in Africa. These people are not given the same land as fellow Pakistanis, not the same food, jobs, opportunities. They're openly mocked on television. You cannot find the same in Africa where that is being done to Asia.
But Nabil, some say that the statements you're saying and the things that you're saying is divisive. It's not causing people to come together. It's causing people to be separate. I mean, what would you say to that?
You're gonna say that to me? How can what I'm saying be more divisive than 300,000 people being forced to live like paupers while their neighbors are allowed to do better just because they're black? How can what I'm saying be more divisive than the fact that every week 12 Africans are murdered in India by lynch mobs? How can what I'm saying be more divisive than the fact that there are Muslim sisters scared to go to Asian majority mosques because they're black, and every time they go there, they're turned away and told to go to another masjid on the other side of town? How is this? This is not causing division. what it is that people are comfortable when nothing is being done if they're not affected. There are some black people, for example, who are happy with being the token black man in a majority Asian company and don't want to lose their job. So because of that, they don't want racism to be spoken about because they're okay. There are Asians out there who are not comfortable with hearing the truth about their culture, and because of that, they don't like it when I talk about it because it upsets them. But I'm not causing division. These divisions existed. My Facebook post did not split up the Ottoman Empire. My Facebook post isn't the reason why Pakistan split from East Pakistan and proceeded to murder hundreds of thousands of people that we now know as Bengalis. My Facebook post isn't the reason why, for example, it's okay and it's common practice for black people to be called Abid in certain countries. So when you're in Egypt, they walk up to you and say things like Sa'akam, so you can look at your hand and see what time it is, and they laugh at you and say you're black, so it's always night. My posts do not create these things, and it's a big deflection and cop-out for people to say that I'm being divisive. If all it takes is a Facebook post to make the Ummah divide, we couldn't have been that united in the first place.
Okay, so back to the brother's statement. He made an apology. I know some people might say that his apology caused more problems than it did.
Most people.
But again, what do you want from the brother? I mean, what form of apology would be acceptable?
A genuine apology. Just, I'm sorry, what I said was wrong, I understand why it was wrong. Not, yeah, but, black people do act this way though, and yeah, but, let me ask you this, right? If I had come out and said, brothers, stop grooming innocent white girls and beating your wives and killing your daughters, we're not Pakistani. Then they get to come out and say, yeah, what I said is wrong, but obviously, I was talking about a particular group of Pakistanis that do it. And I reject the victim mentality of Pakistanis. They'd have my head, right? Nobody would accept it, and rightfully so. If I turn around and said that Palestinians deserve to be killed the way they're being killed, and then turn around and say, yeah, I'm sorry, but you know what I mean, man. I just mean the ones, those ones. Anyway, I reject the victim mentality of Palestinians. It would be offensive. It's only when it's black people that these things are downplayed. The offensive statement, for example, Hamza Yusuf and his statements about black people in America and making it out that their plight right now is their fault, right? And then he gave a half-baked apology, and people try to say that, for not accepting the apology, we're insensitive. If this was their culture or their people's struggles that were being downplayed and insulted like this, they would not accept the apologies they're expecting us to accept.
Okay, so on the issue of this topic of racism then, what can the du'at and the ulama, in your mind, what can the teachers of Islam, the teachers of this religion, what can they do, in your mind, to tackle slavery? I mean, what do you think is their responsibility?
What? Well, slavery?
Sorry, not slavery, racism.
Okay, well, for starters, they need to stop adopting this docile approach to it. They need to call it out for the level of sin that it is, because people saying that what this brother said was a mistake are ridiculous. It's not a mistake. He didn't just fall down and say, black people are criminals. He didn't just fall out of his mouth. He thought about it and he said it. These beliefs exist, and I think it's very important that even the way our religion is taught starts to acknowledge more of the contributions that Africans, Caribbean people, and whatnot have made to Islam, because they are there. And it doesn't make you Nation of Islam or Kemet or Hebrew Israelite to acknowledge the fact that these things were made. I'll give you an example. I was doing a debate on British BBC Asian Network, and someone called in and told me, oh yeah, you're wrong, brother, because Asians aren't racist, we just think we're better than everybody. And I said, if you think you're better than me because of your race, then you're racist. And he said, no, brother, I'm not racist because Bilal was. I was like, listen, before you even mention anything about Bilal, tell me, name two other black Sahabis. Name a black person from the Quran. Name any black person from that period of Islam other than Bilal. And he couldn't. Bilal has been reduced by these people, to the status of the token Muslim. They even erroneously say he was the first ever believer that was black. What nonsense. And that's down to the way the religion is taught. And the thing is, people say it doesn't matter what color. Well, in a world where racism wasn't an issue, it would not matter that he was black. When the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ returned from the Miraj journey, he made a point of describing what Musa ﷺ looked like. I'll leave people watching to go and find out what this description was. Because I think it's important. He knew that racism would be a huge issue. Even before he died, the last khutbah he gave, not khutbah, but speech he gave, The last sermon, let's put that in. The last sermon he gave, the topic he discussed first and foremost, at length, was racism. So if this wasn't a serious, if I know I'm going to die tomorrow, the last thing I say to you is one of the most important things I say to you, right? So a lot of they act like, he's still your brother in Islam, even though he's racist.
Your connection is a bit weak at the moment. I think you might be a bit far from the Wi-Fi or something.
Let me turn on my little magic box here. It will improve my connection in my room. Well, this is in my room, but still. A couple of seconds, my Wi-Fi should
That's fine. So back to the issue of the seriousness of the issue. If I was to give a scale of 1 to 10 of how important you reckon this issue is, 10 being tawheed and shirk, and 1 being, for example, removing something harmful from the street, where would you gauge this topic of racism?
9.7. 9.7. Why? What? Now, tell me if this is a weak hadith, but was it not said that even having a mustard seed of asabiya can remove one from the fold of Islam?
I'm not sure that's authentic, and I'll check it up, inshallah.
I do know they've seen several hadiths that say the one that has this view is not from among us. The one that calls to nationalism is not from among us.
Mm-hmm.
Things like racism and nationalism are cousins. So, you tell me, drinking doesn't remove you. There's no hadith that says drinking alcohol removes somebody from Islam. Yeah, if Abu Ibrahim was standing on the street drinking alcohol, the reaction would have been worse. Yeah? There's no hadith that says that, committing zina of the hands or eyes or whatever removes one from Islam. But if Abu Ibrahim was fondling a girl on the street, everybody would be angrier than they are. Whereas racism is something that we know is foul. It's disgusting. Yet people aren't taking it seriously.
Okay, so one question, I think you kind of touched upon it earlier on, is regards to the issue of people who are racist, but they have no hatred towards someone. So, often what you find in this discussion is that a person may have friends who are black or Chinese or whatever the case may be. They have no issues with them. They work with them. They laugh with them. They joke with them. But you do find that if the opportunity came to marry someone from outside of their culture or from that other person's culture, you find that there will be opposition. Do you see that as a manifestation of racism, or do you see it just a personal preference thing?
50-50, it depends on the situation. If they outright say it's because you're black, then yes, it's racism. But if they don't, because that particular black brother, for example, doesn't have a job and he just turned up in harachis and a thobe and a miswak and things because he's upon the sunnah, he has to now take this girl who's maybe from a middle class home, good job and whatnot, and the family think, no, this guy is not suitable, then no, it's not racism. Or if they feel that, oh, this guy has 3 wives already, we don't want him to do it. Depends. It's based on race, and there's nothing wrong with the brother. And obviously, we already know the hadith about, rejecting a compatible or decent suitor. So again, I don't really discuss the marriage thing. I think in fact, when people talk about things like, oh yeah, I think we need to give our daughters to black men to fight race, that's the most patronizing and insulting thing you could possibly say about racism, because that in itself is born out of a myth that black men are chasing after women of other races. And again, it also shows that we feel we're inferior. And this is coming from me, a man married outside his race, by the way. I didn't go out looking for Asian women to marry. I met my wife through her brother and friends, and we spoke. She was compatible. Khalas, I married her. It wasn't that I was hunting for Pakistani. There's this myth that black brothers are just drooling and fantasizing about these women because supposedly they're more beautiful than black women, which means they're more beautiful than black people. And that's nonsense. So because of that, I don't even like discussing marriage as a litmus test or gauge for racism or countering it. Marry who you want to marry. If you don't want to marry a black person, you don't have to marry a black person. If you want to marry someone that speaks your language, marry someone that speaks your language. But just don't feel that you're inherently superior. Because remember, I know of a brother who married an Asian sister, and she was racist. When they mix race babies, because that's the rave on Instagram. So, it's a weird one, man. That's not a good gauge.
Okay, but how about? I mean, this is because we have a matrimonial organization where we help get people get married, and we've had people come to us and say, "I only want to marry from this side," or "I don't want to marry from that side." And when I ask why, often they might say something like, "Oh, my parents won't be happy with it," or "My in-laws won't be happy with it." Would you find that an example of complacency on this issue, or do you think it's again neither here nor there?
I mean, this is the thing. Again, it's down to individual cases. I would never advise sisters to go and put themselves in a situation they're not ready for. And I say sisters because they're the ones who really affect. They're the ones who get disowned. They're the ones that get honor killed. They're the ones that have to worry about these things. For me, it's like this: if you found a brother and you're like, I will not be happy unless I marry this brother. I have to marry this brother or whatever. As we know, falling in love is a disease, and the cure for this sickness is marrying the person that you love. Yeah. So if that's the case, and a sister believes she's willing to take whatever consequences, and she goes through halal avenues to marry this person, then yeah, go ahead. But other than that, just listening to nafs, oh, I just want to marry a black person because I have a fetish, or because when I was jahil, I used to listen to rap music, so I like black people. That I don't think is a good enough reason for a sister to go against her parents' wishes and marry a black man. In fact, you're going to cause more problems along the line because you may marry somebody and you don't have an understanding of their culture or their struggles. Because remember, if you marry a black man, you inherit the problems as well. So if you're not ready and you don't understand the black experience or any other experience with another culture, I can understand why some people should stick to their own, or why some parents want their kids to stick to their own. I understand it.
Okay, so if we were to form an organization that is dedicated to combat racism, combat the topic, this discrimination, this qawmiya, this tribalism amongst us, and you want to put forward suggestions to the idea because we spoke in length about the problems. Part of this discussion was to form solutions.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of solutions would you suggest, or would you feel it would be a good solution for combating racism on number one, an institutional level, whereby when I say institution in terms of masajid, Islamic organizations, that kind of level, and then racism on an individual level as it relates to your neighbors and the people you see on the streets and whatnot. I mean, what suggestions would you have?
I mean, each situation will probably have a unique suggestion, but first and foremost, I think the curriculum of a lot of Muslim schools and the cultural makeup of the teachers and staff and directors should reflect that of the Muslim Ummah worldwide. I think that it's very important as well that things like not black history, but black contribution to Islam are further acknowledged. And also, I think it's a real shame that people like Bilal radiallahu anh have had, has been reduced to almost Johnny token status. I think it's very important that people who delve deep into the history and tradition of Islam, looking at things like the empires and the role that different continents played, from the Ottoman Empire, for example. Nigerians were a very key part of the Ottoman Empire. A lot of people don't know that. To studying the works of people like not from a religious standpoint, but just from a historic standpoint, of Mandam Fodio, the Jihad of Umar Tal. These people in Africa, because at the end of the day, their Islam are all the West African contribution to the Moors, who then took Islam into the Caribbean and lots of South America and whatnot. These things need to be studied on a wide basis alongside issues of fiqh and whatnot. Why? Because racism is a big problem. And part of the reason why people are racist is because they feel that we've never made a contribution to anything. A lot of people see us inherently inferior. Like, I remember someone finding out that certain prophets were black and being outraged that people said that, to the point where he said, "Oh, how dare you insult these prophets?" He didn't even realize he was being racist. I'm like, wait, why is it an insult to be black? What's wrong with me? So, from a religious standpoint, theological standpoint, that's important, as well as education in history. Then, from a social standpoint, I think people who are from a certain culture need to start educating staff members within the masjid, educating security, imams, and whatnot on cultural sensitivities to other cultures. Because how often have we gone to the masjids and then we're turned away? I know people have been turned away because they have dreads, which there's nothing wrong with dreads, and I've got the deal for that I can show you as well. Or we've got people who are being kicked out of masjids because they don't look like the people within that masjid. I've gone to Muslim TV shows on things like the Islam Channel. In fact, I'll say the name. I'm not going to play things like Islam Channel and whatnot. And then some very culturally insensitive things are done, like, oh, like the Asian guy sees me straight away and starts saying things like, yo, wagwan, you want some weed? This happened to me on Ikra TV, Islam channel. You have certain things as well. There are just certain tropes that are regurgitated about Muslims that in the outside world would be unacceptable, but we're supposed to take from our Muslim brothers and sisters. I think cultural sensitivity, Muslim companies should, the same way you have in companies like Ernst and Young and whatnot, they have to come in and talk about diversity. I think Muslim majority companies and charities need to have the same thing. And again, directors and whatnot, their boards need to reflect the population of Muslims worldwide, not in a country, worldwide.
So you're saying, so you're suggesting that, for example, like masajid, where they have like what do you call it, committee members. They see that sometimes you have masajid that are very polarized in their committee members. If it's a Gujarati masjid, all the committee members are Gujarati, Imam Gujarati. Everyone in the management and affairs of it is Gujarati, and so on and so forth, or whatever. So you're saying in those institutions, it would be of benefit to diversify their management.
Yes, I mean, and some people turn around and say that that's ridiculous. Why? Most people are. But think about this: imagine if in schools, because most Muslims do not send their kids to Muslim schools, we send our kids to either state schools or private schools for those who can afford it. How would we feel if we saw that they made a point of making sure all the teachers were white because the majority of the kids in that area are white? We wouldn't be happy about that. We wouldn't be happy if the governors of a school are all white, and they tell us that the reason is because the majority of the populace there are white. So the same thing with masjids and everything else. The governors of Muslim schools, the trustees and board members of all these masajid should reflect not the population of the local Muslim community, but the Muslim community worldwide, because Islam is a worldwide faith. And as such, if let's say there's no black or white people or whatnot available, then that's fine. But it should not be difficult for somebody from a different nationality or race or culture to become a trustee member of a particular masjid, because if Islam comes before culture, it shouldn't matter. If a person, for example, doesn't speak Gujarati or Hindu or Punjabi or any of these things, what matters is if they are upon Quran and Sunnah. If you're supposed to a masjid that follows Quran and Sunnah, of course, if you're a masjid, that doesn't do that, then, you're on your own there, mate. But yeah.
On the issue on language, you mentioned some institutions that teach Islam actually teach Islam in local languages, not languages accessible to all Muslims in the UK, i.e., they're in the UK, which speaks English, and if anything, Islamic language is in Arabic. But you find that the Islamic studies is taught in Urdu or in Gujarati. You find out an example of compartmentalizing or separating the ummah, or you think that's just it is what it is?
I mean, if it's for the older generation, who maybe came here years ago and can't speak English.
No, I don't mean lessons, open lessons like in a little halaqah in a message. I'm talking about an actual like alim courses, madrasas, schools, institutions.
Right, but if you're teaching the religion here in England, and you should teach it in the language, we're supposed to spread the faith. How are you going to spread the faith if you only you teach it in Urdu? So what if, for example, there's only one masjid in the entire area? Let's say I live in Shrewsbury or Scunthorpe, or one of these majority, white areas, and there's only one masjid, and of course it's majority Asian. What if Billy or John or Joseph decides he wants to become a Muslim and he goes to learn Islam? You're telling me he has to learn Urdu first before he can then start learning Arabic to then start learning the religion? That's ridiculous.
Okay. One other thing, which came to the issue of language, I've had more than one Asian person tell me that, brother, there's nothing wrong with the word kala, because kala just means black. All I'm saying when I say the Galan boy is the black boy. I mean, why would you take offense to that?
Because any Asian that tells you that is lying to you. I actually speak to a conversational level Punjabi, right? And understand bits of Urdu. There are other words they can use, for example, African, to determine if somebody is African and whatnot. And whatever, a lot of the time, the way they use the word kala is in a derogatory way. It is, and they don't just call it kala, they call it kala bandar. And also, they attribute negative behavior to the word kala. So, for example, your kid comes back home and he's smoking weed, or he's getting into fights or whatever, or he's behaving like this kali, which is the plural of kala. Or if you've got a daughter, she starts wearing hijab, she's wearing typos, or you see a Guria, she's behaving like white, Gora, Guria, she's behaving like those people, right? And then on top of that, Kala, blackness, because this isn't just racism, I'm talking about anti-blackness. Many Asians get told not to go into the sun lest their skin get darker. When they insult, for example, when a racist Pakistani insults Bengalis, the first thing they go to, apart from their height, which, it's supposed to be shorter people, apart from their height, the first thing they go to is the fact that they are darker skinned in general than Pakistanis. Yeah? So, and then everyone must be the Gora, perfect, white.
So what you're saying here is that it's not necessarily the meaning of the word, it's the fact that they're using it to divide the ummah and view people as differently. Is that what you're saying?
They're using it as a negative term, a pejorative term. They don't use the word Kala in a positive way at any point. It is generally, sometimes if you ask, okay, which guy was it? Oh, how did Kala hair? Oh, he was black. Yeah, fine. But when you're Kala Bandar, when they say it in that way, then it's insulting. And a lot of the time, and this thing, remember, I'm married to a South Asian, and I didn't just marry her, I married her entire family. Like, it's not one of them ones where she's been disowned. My wife's family are very active in my life. I see them regularly, which is why I know so much about the culture, even more so than I did when I first started talking about racism. And even they will tell you that Kala is used in a negative way. It is generally used in a negative way, not just to describe looks, but it's also used to describe behavior as well. And generally, the view is this: don't let your kids play with Kali because they will come back and they'll become thieves, or they'll catch AIDS. I know a sister who had to leave Hull. She lived in Hull. She married a Sudanese man, and the racism she encountered was so bad that she had to leave. Asians would tell their kids not to play with her children in front of her because they were black and they had AIDS. And they used to say, oh, yeah, the Shidi house, Shidi or Kala. It was an insult. And like I said, in their home country, there's about 300,000 black people living there, and their name is Shidi. It's not their official name, but that's what they're called, Shidi. It's actually a racist pejorative term, but they're called that generally, even on the news, even though it offends them, because it's the norm in Pakistani culture.
Okay. So coming into the end of the interview, and this is a very important point. If the likes of Abu Ibrahim or others who may have said statements of a racially charged manner were to say, look, you know what, you made a fair point, it's not a good statement, I think we should work together to combat this, not in just in my community, as in their community, the Asian community. Let's come together and let's bury the hatchet about our difficulties or our enmity. Let's work together to try and come back together. Would you be prepared to do that, or is it gone too deep?
Yeah, if he can convince me that he's genuine and that he himself is making an effort to change, because he has some deep-seated issues. It's very clear. Also not just based on what he said. Because remember, he forgot to mention in this interview that after the first video, there was another video where he again attributed criminality to being Jamaican. Right? There's two videos, not one. And also he has done so apparently in several other videos, because people have contacted me and actually let me know. Because I didn't go out looking for these videos; they were sent to me. Right? So again, for someone like him, who then also expressed other racist views like black victim mentality, that's a very insensitive thing to say, considering the amount of things we have been through as a community, and the fact that if it was not for our grandparents and parents coming to this country here and fighting skinheads, many Asians would not be able to walk the street safely. So to say that we have a victim mentality, these kind of issues aren't things that you just say sorry for and then they disappear. He has to educate himself. He has to go and read up on things and do research and look at things to fully understand why his comments are problematic. Now, if he can convince me that he's doing that, then I'm more than happy to work with him. If not, then everything would just be lip service, right?
Okay, fair enough. And on conclusion to that, I mean, do you have any, if you could send out a concise message to Muslims, Asian, Arab, even black people, white people, what would be your message about Islam, the United Ummah? What would be your final conclusive message that you want to send out to the people?
I would say, unfortunately, the United Ummah does not exist, and it's our fault. When someone talks about racism, the worst thing you can possibly do is say, "Well, bro, there's no racism in Islam." Because if I were to come to your house and rob you and kill members of your family, and you say, "Hey, why you do that?" I'm like, "Hey, bro, there's no robbery or murder in Islam." That wouldn't make sense. So if people are being racist, replying with regurgitated rhetoric that gets likes on Facebook does not help the situation. Stop telling black Muslims, "Oh, but brother Bilal was black." We know because you've told us hundreds of times. there were other people that were black too. So it's actually insulting to the legacy of Bilal radiallahu anhu that all you do is reduce him, you just reduce him to being a token Muslim, or the fact that the one thing they know is I was a freed slave, because Salman al-Farsi was a freed slave. But nobody ever says Salman al-Farsi is a freed slave. I would say that we're not asking you to like us, we're asking you to respect us and view us as equals. Just because you don't call me nigger, or you don't call me Kala, does not mean you're not a racist. If you don't see me as your equal, then you are a racist. And I would say that, if you don't like being called racist, if it hurts you when you hear these things, you may have some deep-seated issues. I would also say that I am not an elected representative of black people, although most conscious ones agree with me. What I will say is this: if you dislike me for what I've said and not for what you've misunderstood. Don't attribute things to me that I have not said. I have not said that all Asians are A, B, C, and D. What I have said is that there is an inherent tendency within South Asian culture and non-black culture as a whole to militate against blackness, to the point where even if a Bengali had darker skin or a Pakistani had darker skin, his own relatives would treat him differently because of how black he is. Now, every Asian watching this knows that is true. So think of this. If you treat your own brother from your same country and place as you badly because his skin is dark, imagine how badly you treat black people. And lastly, I would say this as well. Think about this. If tomorrow Isa, alayhi salatu salam, or the Mahdi or whoever came on earth and he didn't look like you, if you're a racist, there's a chance that you're not going to follow him. If his hair is a bit curlier than you expected, or his skin is a bit darker, and all your life you've been raised to see black people as evil and black people as bad, tomorrow, if these great figures who are coming to liberate us before Yom al-Qiyamah, when the hour is near, when these people come, are you telling me that you're going to risk not following them because maybe their skin is a different color from yours?
Jazakallah khair, Nabil. It's been a very beneficial discussion. Inshallah, we'll conclude here. أحسن الله إليكم بارك فيكم. السلام